Lesson 3.9, page number 235, combinations and operations, or combinations of operations and complex fractions. We're going to get into some things where we're going to be putting a whole lot of stuff together that we've done, and that's traditionally what happens in math, is you take what you already know, add it to other things, and you come up with a pretty complicated problem and solution when you start putting it all together like that. So let's start out with one that is a little bit trickier but not too bad, and we'll just kind of work our way into some more challenging ones. Alright, if you remember order of operations, PEMDAS, we do our multiplication before we do our addition and subtraction. So in this case we're going to multiply those before we do anything else, and in order to multiply those we first of all have to change them into improper fractions. So we end up with that. Now we multiply. Okay, so we have 5 plus our 55 over 6. And when you simplify those, first of all we have to change this into an improper fraction. So 6 goes into 55, 9 times, 54, 1/6. Okay, so we have 9 and 1/6 there. So we can take our 5 plus 9 and 1/6, and remember we can add our whole parts here together and we get 14 and 1/6. Alright, another way that you can do this, that the book shows, is they find common denominators so that they can put these two together. So instead of doing it the way I did, they said, okay, this is a 6, that means this has to be a 6, which means this has to turn into a 30, because 30 over 6 is 5. Now they add those to get 85 over 6. Now they reduce it. Either way works. Doesn't really matter. But there's two different methods of doing that. You'll find that to be true about math. There's a lot of times there's several different ways to get the same answer, and sometimes one way is simpler than the other, and sometimes it's not. You just have to, through practice, kind of figure out which way is going to be the easiest for you. Alright, so let's put a 1 there. So let's take something like that. Again, you do what's in the parentheses first, and then you do the multiplication. So if we do what's in the parentheses first, we're going to have to find common denominators here. Rather than go through the whole thing again, just tell you common denominators are 8, because 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 is a common denominator in itself. So we're going to change this to 6 over 8 plus 5 over 8, because multiply the 4 times 2 to get 8, 3 times 2 gave us our 6 there. And we're going to change these to improper fractions. So 2 times 8 is 16, 17, 18, 19 over 8. And we're going to add 1 times 4 is 4, plus 1 is 5. And we need to change this to a common denominator of 8. So to change this 4 to an 8, we multiplied it times 2, and this 5 times 2, so that gives us 5 times 2 is 10, over 4 times 2 is 8. So this is going to actually turn into 10 over 8. Okay, now we can add these things together, and when we add them together we get 11 over 8 times 29 over 8. And if we could, we would change these to prime factors and cancel what we could, but in this case we can't do that, so we just have to multiply out. So 11 times 29 ends up being 319, and 8 times 8 is 64, and because we had improper fractions up there, we're going to reduce that by dividing 64 into 319. And when we divide that out, we end up getting 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1, 25, 9 minus 5, or 6 is 3, 11 minus 5 is 6, so we end up with 64 and 63 over 64. You can see that there. That ends up being our final answer. So let's continue. Flip over to the next page there, to page number 236. We're going to do quite a few examples in here, so probably don't need me to do any of the problems from the homework, because man, if you can do these examples, you'll be doing just fine. And 4 1/3, and I'm sure we'll end up with 2 videos on this lesson. Alright, so what this says is we're going to do what's in the parentheses first, because remember PEMDAS? Parentheses, then exponents. We have an exponent here, so we'll do that next. Then we'll do the multiplication times 1/2, and then we'll do our addition here in that order, so following the PEMDAS. So we can kind of stick this over to the side and just worry about this right now. So let's just, I'm going to put this in a box here so we know to come back to it, but let's just do what's in our parentheses right now. And at this point, we're fortunate in that we can add these. We've already got common denominators, so already good to go. So we can just add our 3 and our 4 and get a 7. Common denominator, so we can just add our numerators. And that's in our square, our parentheses that are squared. 3 over 3 is 1. So if you remember, 7 and 7 in a fraction means you're adding those two. So 7 plus 1, that's going to give me 8 squared for that. Okay, so all of this turns into 8 squared. So I'm going to erase this whole thing and put an 8 squared there. So see what I got there? I added all that together and I got an 8 to the 2nd power. Alright, so that's what I have left. So let's go ahead and go to the next step, which is exponents, the second one there, times 64. See, I put a parenthesis around it. If I did not put a parenthesis around it, it would mean 1/2 plus 64, which is an incorrect way of writing anything, so you got to put the parentheses there. Alright, so I've got the 64. 3/5. 1/2 times 64 is the same as 64 over 2, or half of 64, which is 32. Now I'm going to add these two together. When I add those two together, I got to find common denominator, or because they're written as a plus and one of them is a whole number, I can do it, switch them around the other way and put the whole number first. And because they're added, I can rewrite that as 32 3/5. Already written as an improper fraction, or a mixed number. I mean, I could find common denominator, add them, then I've got an improper fraction, then I have to divide and switch it back to this, but this is so much easier. No work involved with that, so I like doing it that way. Alright, brings us to what are called complex fractions on page 236. So, let's just try one right now. And a complex fraction is a fraction in which the numerator and or the denominator have fractions in them. So, for example, 3/4 divided by 5/6. Notice how I made this line longer. I made that line longer because I've got a numerator with a fraction, and I don't want everything to be all confusing. If I made everything the same length, it just would not help you to figure out which one is the numerator, which one is the denominator. So if I make that line longer, it just kind of puts it more in your face. Because I like to work with the top number, simplify it, the bottom number, simplify it, before I start messing with it. So in this case, from your division experience, this is the same as 3/4 times 6 over 5. Remember, you take the bottom number, or the second number, if you're doing it horizontally, and flipping it upside down and multiplying it. So you multiply it through and you're good to go. Alright, so I'm going to continue with a 3.9b in just a second.